You are listening to Service Course by the Cycling Podcast with Lizzy Banks and Tom Whalley.
Hello, I'm Tom Whalley, and I'm joined, amazingly, by Lizzy Banks. Lizzy, I can't believe you're here because, you know, in the interim, you've been on the main podcast, you've been on GCN, you've been on the telly. I'm surprised you've got time for this little podcast.
Well, Tom, this is the original and the best. I know my roots, I know my loyalties. I'm staying here with you guys. We've got so much more tech where this lot came from, so...
Oh, we've got a fascinating episode this week. I mean, loosely, we're talking about Christmas gifts to get, you know, your cycling friends and stuff. But there's so much more to it. I mean, you've done an interview with a guy called Henry Furniss, and I cannot wait to play that out. It's he's a fascinating guy, and you cover so much. So we'll hear about that, and also we're going to hear about maybe the chain. The humble bicycle chain being redeveloped.
The chain that's going to change the world.
The chain that's going to change the world, possibly.
Not just
so we'll get to that later
as well.
Not just cycling, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's across the board that it could really, you know, it really is the reinvention of the chain that could change pretty much everything from cycling to manufacturing to goodness knows what.
But I wanted to catch up with you, Lizzy, because it's been a month, pretty much, best part of a month. We can now reveal your new team. I've been desperate to do that. So for this year, you're going to be with Superstrata WNT.
Yeah, it seems like old news now, and like you said, it's been everywhere. And the Cycling Podcast were the first to know, even though the Cycling Podcast Tech Show is the last place for it to be announced. But no, it's really good news. I'm really excited. Fresh start, and the biggest thing is that Banks tooling power drill range is maybe not that far away, because at least I've got some top quality tungsten carbide tools to put in it from Superstrata WNT.
Well, talking of tools, actually, I haven't asked you where we are, Lizzy, but because of tools, you are in a car sat outside your house.
Yeah, once again, I'm sat outside the house because the builders are doing the roof today. So actually, you can still hear it. So apologies for that. But you know, it's just nice to have some really authentic tech background noise for you guys and the cars driving past.
Well, with your new team, it must be quite exciting, because I guess you're getting loads of new kit, loads of new tech arriving day by day.
Well, I did have a really exciting helmet delivery this morning. I'm off to go and do some aero testing soon, and yeah, I got my new helmets, so it's really exciting. We're off on a training camp in December, and so yeah, I'll get all my new bikes and new kit, and I mean, new bike day. It's got to be one of the best days of the year for a cyclist. So. And, you know, Orbea, which I'm going to be on next year, they've just released this really cool new time trial bike. Actually, I was asked about this over on the main pod because somebody spotted Dan Martin on the new Factor bike. So that's something that Factor haven't released yet. They've not even talked about yet. But if you want to race a bike in the Olympics in 2020 Olympics in 2021, then it needs to have been used in competition the previous year. It was a bit tricky this year because obviously you tend to use it quite late in the year. So, and you tend to usually use it at a competition where there's not really many people there. So the chances of people seeing this new tech is quite low, and then people can't really copy it. But the Vuelta, both for the men and the women, was the only opportunity that these bikes could be used for both Factor and Orbea in order to get them kind of certified by... certified that by the UCI that they'd been used in competition this year, therefore they could be used in the Olympics next year. So the bike Dan Martin was riding in the time trial at the Vuelta was totally blacked out. Quite different to the old Factor to time trial bike that had the split down tube. And the thing is, you see, you know, they've got Chris Froome on their team next year. If he is in top form for next year's Olympics, then he's going to want to be on this bike. So yeah, I'm excited about new bike day, but and there's a lot of new tech there in the new Orbea time trial bike, and we've got the Orbea Orca aero bikes as well. So it's really exciting, and I'm just looking forward to kind of planning for things to come, and hopefully a relatively normal season next year. I think that what we've done this year has shown that we can race safely, and the organisers have all done such a good job putting things together. So yeah, let's just keep fingers crossed for a resumption of a normal season in 2021.
And where do you start then, Lizzie? Have you got your calendar planned yet? I guess it's coming into shape.
Yeah, so we'll discuss it on training camp, and we'll obviously, there's a lot of riders whose needs need to be kind of tailored and intertwined into the program, and there's quite a lot of track riders on the team as well, and they've got their requirements for the Olympics, of course, too, and track worlds and things like that. So it's really quite a complicated jigsaw puzzle of trying to meet everybody's needs. But got my targets. Unfortunately, Tour de Yorkshire is no longer one of those after we heard about the cancellation of that, but hopefully it's going to be back in 2022, because that's definitely a race pretty close to my heart. But there's so many other opportunities on the calendar, and I'm excited to race with my new teammates as well, and actually I'm also excited to see how my current teammates get on in their new teams, and not all of them are announced yet, actually. So there is some more exciting news to come this year. There is some more good news to come in 2020.
But you've mentioned the Olympics there, by the way, Lizzie. I've got to say, this sounds a bit ignorant here, but I've lost track. When are the Olympics, or when are they sort of penciled in for?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's confusing with them being called the Tokyo 2020, right? But no, so it's the same time, but next year. So end of July, beginning of August, 2021.
And all right, okay. Before we get, I mean, I'm getting waylaid here. I want to get back onto the main subject of this week's pod, but in terms of training, right? So you've had a weird year, with COVID and the changes to training. Have you learned anything from last year, or from this season just gone? And will that change your training slightly for this year?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, one time on this podcast, we're definitely going to have to do an episode about the tech behind training, because
yeah, definitely,
it's such an interesting thing, and there's so many factors, and so much of it is also psychological as well. The mental aspect of training is so important, being in a good place and you can really push yourself. And for me, I would say that is one of the most important things that I learned during the first lockdown period, because I coach myself. And I really, coming into the first lockdown, I was super, super fit. I was in the best form of my, the best form I'd ever been in my life. And so,
well, you were coming off that 6th place at Omloop, weren't you, as well?
Yeah.
Where you'd gone really well.
And my fitness there, it was just so high, and I kind of felt invincible almost. And I knew that at that point I needed to take a step back, because the problem is, if you maintain that level for too long, then you just get too tired. So I really took a big step back at that point and eased off, and mentally as well. Just if I didn't feel like going for a ride, I didn't. There was probably 3 weeks. It was kind of like a normal off season, but in April, I would go for a walk if I felt like it, not ride my bike if I didn't feel like it, and just try and relax as much as possible and take it easy, because at this point I didn't think there would be any racing that year. And then after that, I then really focused on enjoying my training, and not specifically doing efforts. So not writing down in my training plan, I'm going to do 5 times 5 minute all out efforts, but using Strava segments and stuff to push myself, or saying I'm going to go up this hill as hard as I can, and then this hill, and then this hill, so that everything was fresh. Everything was kind of done in a slightly different way, but you're still getting the same thing out of yourself. And then I was exploring. I was actually using Komoot to try and find new places that were really on my doorstep, and to keep everything exciting. So I was actually training pretty hard, but I didn't have any of that mental stress of kind of, I've got to be doing this, I've got to do 4 times 10. I just kept it fresh, and on my rides I would always plan what I was going to do for the next day, for the next week, for the next month, and when we then started hearing about the new racing calendar, I would work that in and work out how it was going to happen, but I didn't actually write it down. It was all in my head. So I think a lot of people and maybe a lot of teams and other coaches would be pretty surprised and scared by that. But the thing is, it is all down there. It's just that other people can't see it, and it's only me that can see it. And that doesn't really matter if I'm coaching myself. And if you asked me, I'd be able to talk you through and tell you specifically what I was doing and why and when. But I think that it's quite a non-traditional approach to not have anything written down. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to write anything down this year. I think that it's important to have a structure and a plan, and it does help to write things down sometimes, especially when in the grey winter months you need to be able to stick to something. But if there's a really challenging time, then using that kind of different approach and more relaxed attitude, but despite that kind of relaxed attitude, still maintaining the quality of training, it was something that was really important for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, we all know this. I mean, we just think a lot of the time professional athletes just live in this little bubble where everything is perfect and relaxed all the time. You can always do all the training that you want to do. Life never gets in the way. And that's not the case. And I think, if you've learned over the last year how to adapt better to when training is interrupted, for instance, or your program is interrupted, and just to be able to go, yeah, that's okay, I can chill out, it won't have too many detrimental effects. I think that's a massive learning. I
totally agree with you, Tom, and I think that the thing is that I think some riders actually don't realise that stress is TSS. So we talk about, most riders use Training Peaks, and we talk about TSS, which is your training stress score, and everything is measured by percentage of your FTP, and there's a certain training stress score that is calculated by how hard you're going at a certain point times how long you're going for that, at that intensity for how long, and that creates your TSS. But stress is also a type of TSS, and you have to factor all this in. So if you've had a particularly stressful week, everybody will know what it feels like to be emotionally exhausted or physically exhausted, but that emotional exhaustion is really an important thing, and you have to pull it back at that point because the risk of overtraining is so great. And like you said, everybody has things going on in their lives. I really, really wish life as a professional athlete was really uncomplicated, and it was just as simple as I go out and ride my bike and I come back and get a massage and everything's ready for me. But that is not at all what it's like. Maybe if you're at the top of the sport, but everyone has things going on and everyone has their challenges that they have to deal with, and it's really about balancing life's challenges and the stuff that life gets in the way with your training, and making the most out of that, and getting the best out of the situation.
Having cats helps, doesn't it? That's what I think.
Yeah, cats. That's the top tip from the Tech Podcast. Get a cat to help with your stress levels.
I could go on a whole sideline about how my cats have got worse during lockdown, but I'm not going to. Listen, Lizzy, tell me about Henry Furniss.
Well, I am really excited to have Henry Furniss on the podcast, because when we were talking about 3D printing last month, I was chatting to Hexa, and they were saying you should get in touch with Henry because he is, what Tom and I really want is a 3D printed bike. That's our dream. And they said, well, get in touch with Henry because he's doing some really interesting projects, and he's thinking about 3D printed bikes. Turns out 3D printed bikes aren't quite as close as we thought they might be yet, but he's got some pretty cool projects going on. And he actually was the founder of WyndyMilla back in 2009. Anyway, let's talk to Henry now, and he's going to tell us all about his new project with 3D printed lugs and his pretty exciting R&D group, where we hope in the future they're going to be creating some pretty wacky things and be a regular feature on our pod.
Part of my background, I don't know if WyndyMilla's on your radar at all, has been.
Yeah.
But I founded WyndyMilla in 2009, December 2009, with my wife.
Wow.
And exactly 10 years later, in December 2019, we sold our remaining shares to sort of do something new, just 10 years in the game, new horizons and all that. So that's what's kind of brought me to where I am now and what I'm doing with playing around with 3D printed stuff.
So what are you doing now? I think that's the big question, because I heard this vicious rumor about a 3D printed bike. Is that true?
Well, not in its entirety, in so much as definitely not a whole 3D printed bike. So what we're playing around with is 3D printed lugs. in total layman's terms, although most people know what lugs are, these, if you think about the main tube sections of the bike, so the top tube, the down tube, the seat tube, the chain stays and the seat stays, that in a monocoque frame, those are all molded and they're essentially in one piece. In a traditional made to measure frame, each of those tubes are mitered, and mitering means they're cut so that they seamlessly fit with each other, and you bond them with resin and then you wrap them in carbon. Whereas a lug, we 3D print the lug, so like the bottom bracket section or where the top tube meets the seat tube, and then you just cut the tubes to size and you bond them into your lug. So it's a different kind of a process, but it's a very versatile process for lots of different reasons, which I can explain more about.
What is the benefit of a 3D printed lug over a traditional lug, or a carbon fiber lug, or a steel one or whatever?
Yeah, so the benefit of a 3D printed lug is that you can make it in any form or shape or size that you like. And the most significant thing is there's no tooling. So take a Colnago C64. They're right at the forefront of everyone's minds at the moment because of the Tour de France and Pogacar, I never know how to pronounce it, but anyway. Those lugs are actually made in a mold. So they're molded in 5 or 6 different sizes, however many sizes Colnago have. If there's suddenly a change in fashion or a change in the way that people like to route bikes, the cabling, or changes in standards of brakes or anything like that, they have to remake all of those molds. And the tooling for molds is really expensive. And I mean, it's expensive for the big guys, but the big guys have a bigger budget. But for the smaller players like us who want to be competitive in the market in terms of technology and the ability to be at the cutting edge of technology, the beauty of 3D printing getting to a point now where it's advanced enough to actually make functional parts as opposed to what it was used for up until now, moreover, which was to make rapid prototyping. It means that we can experiment with really cool stuff, but there's no tooling costs. You're printing into air, and that air that you're printing into is free. You need the printer, but all of a sudden it's much less risky. We can make a head tube lug, for example, and decide that it's not quite how we like it, so we just make the next one different. Whereas to make a head tube lug mold, you're talking in the thousands of pounds, not the hundreds. So it's a very expensive process if you start getting it wrong.
What about economy of scale, though? So, because, I mean, if you're making one part, yeah, it's much better than, making a mold, because like you say, you want to do something differently, so you just print it up differently. But when you want to then scale this up, it's difficult because then you need more 3D printers or whatever. So is that a point that you get the product that you want using the 3D printing? And if you then decide that that's a product that you want to mass produce, that's when you then go to a mold?
Yeah, yes and no in a way. I mean, there's a few things. 3D printing is still in its relative infancy, so it's moving so fast. So that 3D printing process will become much faster. At the moment, it is still slow, but it's much faster than a frame miterer, somebody who would make a made-to-measure frame. But it's a good point regards scale, and it's actually why the big guys aren't using it, because monocoque fabrication, when you've got your market and that you've got a very good idea from historical marketing data how many bikes you're going to sell, so it's safe to make those molds. You know that you can make a mold that's only going to be relevant for a year, and you've got the budget to remake it for the following year, and you're going to sell enough bikes. For us, to give you an idea of in terms of what I would describe, if we took this to market as a brand, we wouldn't want to be cottage industry. Like, most of the, at the moment, there's no one really making carbon bikes in the UK beyond, maybe 10, 12 a year. So if we wanted to take it up a level, we're still only looking at getting to a point where within 5 years, perhaps we'd be looking at making 500 bikes a year. So we're never going to be going for mass scale. For us as a relative niche brand, if it was something that we took to market, it's something where we actually have a very robust business on our hands at that sort of level. And if you look at some of the people that lead the charge in terms of custom sort of made to measure bikes globally, they're still only selling sort of 3,000 to 4,000 bikes a year. But if you get your margins right, and if you get the product right so that it's desirable enough and likable enough for the customer and is underpinned by credibility, then you've got something really exciting on your hands. And the difference with 3D printing is that then gives you the ability to be really agile in terms of market trends and also your technology. The reason I say yes or no is just because you could, if you found out that your bikes were just unbelievably popular, which would be a fantastic problem to have, and that there were lots of people that wanted them so quickly, they wanted the stock sizes, then you would then have that confidence from market forces that I was talking about, where you could think, okay, let's open up a mold for lug sets in 5 different sizes because we just know the demand is there. And then you could do that. So, that could create an economy of scale, but that might be surpassed by 3D printing becoming more efficient anyway. So we've been proving concept. And when I use the royal we, obviously you're just talking to me. So I always wanted to make bikes in the UK. And this isn't because I think people in the UK can make bikes any better than anywhere else. It's all to do with having a viable bike that we can take to market, so that, with any business, for you to be able to progress and to improve your product, you have to sell enough. And the kind of model where you design a bike in the UK, but it's made in Italy, for example, is challenging. And it's challenging to the degree that it's really hard to get off the runway. It's really hard to get beyond selling bikes to your direct community that buy them because they spend time with you. And the reason for that is because the industry's moved on quite a lot. WyndyMilla started in 2009. It was before the renaissance of cycling in this country. So as it's grown, other players have come to the market, and they're all fabricating. A lot of them are fabricating in-house. And if you don't have that layer of control and credibility, even if your product's really good, when people do their due diligence, they'll end up buying from someone else. And with WyndyMilla in particular, I think we always punched above our weight in terms of marketing. And I think what we did fantastically well was we marketed the idea of a custom offering incredibly well, something that was a little bit different to a Trek or a Specialized. And the kind of people that would be on our radar because of that are quite far through that avid journey. They're into cycling in quite a big way. So when those people did their due diligence, it sounds crazy, but I'd go as far as to say that out of 100 people that got custom on their radar because of WyndyMilla as a brand, I would say 99 of them would then go on to buy from someone else who was perhaps fabricating in-house, and just had that ability to do like a factory tour and to actually be able to talk about their very own hands-on process, moreover than that sort of, really very commonplace designed in the UK, but ultimately made by someone else.
Yeah, once people get this idea in their head that that's what they want, then they seek that out.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same with steel frames. I think, you know, once people really buy into the idea of handmade steel frames, and they only want to go to specific handmade steel frame builders, you know, who do it in their shed or whatever, and it's like a purist thing, isn't it? I think.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's that kind of people that buy into that niche level of bike brands. And there's just that really, really distinct line in the sand, which is, do you make these bikes yourself, or do you design them and then someone else makes them? And even with steel, there's that very clear line in the sand. You've got people in their sort of Shoreditch sort of hipster workshops actually making these bikes themselves. And then you've got people who are outsourcing them to other countries or other factories, which is all fine and really good. They're both equally good bikes, but one of them just has that added layer of romance and credibility. And you know, you can go to that workshop, you can see your bike being fabricated, not built, but fabricated, actually put together. And that's the journey that I wanted to go on. And that's
it's a level of traceability that you can't really get with anything else.
Yeah. And when I say we, I always had, you know, over 10 years being in the industry, you obviously create a good network. The real value is in the network, the relationships and the people you meet. And once you have that network of people, I started in my own mind to sort of formulate my, you know, whether you call it a mastermind group, a brain trust, or I guess you could say my fantasy football team of people that I would want to have involved in something new that would give me the confidence to take it to market. And that's what I've been doing in lockdown. I've been, you know, a gathering of the clans of sorts, that putting together a mastermind group and you know, think tanking this and thinking, is this something that could fly?
So in this mastermind group, what we really want to know is, there somebody who can see a 3D printed bike of the future and can envisage how we can make this work, and if anybody thinks it's going to happen?
So everyone thinks, you know, and everyone, I've obviously spoken to everyone and anyone about this, and you know, Demetrius, who was on your last call, there's no one who knows better than him about all this kind of stuff. I think what they'll all agree on is that it's going to be possible to have a completely 3D printed bike. It is going to come. And I think, you know, this is my view, I would say it's not just me, it's a sort of educated view from speaking to lots of different people. I always have this notion that in 10 years' time, you could be sitting in your living room on a Friday night and you open a glass of wine, or you're having a few beers, and you end up having one too many, and you frivolously press print on your home printer on the latest sort of 8K Cervelo bike frame, and you forgot that you did it, and you wake up in the morning and your husband or wife goes absolutely mental and, you know, says, there's this new bike frame, you know, and you're like, oh my God, I forgot I pressed print on that, you know. And
I can definitely see that happening in our house.
Yeah, and you know, it would be, you have to assume this printer is probably going to paint it at the same time, you know. That will come. But right now, to the very best of my knowledge, to be able to make a complete bike 3D printed in carbon fiber specifically is not yet possible.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to ask you, because I don't understand how you can 3D print in carbon fiber, because, you know, carbon fiber is layer upon layer of carbon fibers that are then, you know, mixed together with the resin and set with the resin. So how can you print something that is by its own structure a layer? I don't know if I'm describing myself very well,
no,
but I'm sure you
understand.
And please help me.
You're making sense, and it's it's a really good point, because the whole structural integrity in carbon fiber is the fact that it's continuous, and it's lots of mixed orientations, which means it's strong in all sorts of different directions. So 3D printing, like I should stress that in the whole of this process, I'm very definitely not the engineer, but obviously I have a lot of knowledge about it because of the engineers that I'm working with. And my understanding of 3D printing is that first off, you're just 3D printing in plastics. That's the 3D printing that's been around for a while, and you can have your desktop printers and print out little toys and trinkets. You can use it for rapid prototyping. So if we decided to design a new fork and we wanted to see how it looks physically, we could have it rapid prototype. So we've got a physical, actual size fork and steer it in our hands. But if you put it on a bike, it would break straight away. It's not structural. Then the next thing is, people came up with a new technology to infuse that resin or plastic that you're 3D printing with carbon fibers, but they're all chopped up. So they make
a little bit like the way if you've got graphene, you add graphene in a powder. And
yeah, this is like sort of not a powder form, but like chopped up fibers.
Yeah,
and they do make it stronger, maybe like 20% stronger, but you're still, a far cry away from having something that has structural integrity that you could print the whole frame and ride around on. A more recent technology, which is part of the journey to being game-changing, is you can now have a spool of continuous carbon fiber that gets laid down into the print as it's printing. So for the first time, you can have continuous carbon fiber in a lug, for example, if you printed a lug for a bike, which is really exciting because that has the potential to really give the small guys the opportunity to compete with the big guys. It's still a couple of steps away. You can't choose the orientation of those fibers yet. I
was going to say you're still quite limited in terms of the layup, because we all know that the way that the carbon fiber is laid up has such a big impact on, the quality, the ride feel, the strength, the dimensional strength, which is such an important thing as well.
Yeah. So for me, there is, we're experimenting with this, and there are ways that you can make a framework. We've already made prototypes using 3D printed continuous fiber lugs. But what we knew straight away is that bonding with those materials is a really big deal, because the bond is where all the strength is. It's the equivalent of your weld if you're welding. But also because you can't choose the orientation of the fibers, you can't get that strength in every direction. So the only way that you can make it work as a lug is to print the lug using continuous fiber, but then you have to wrap it in carbon, which works, and you can have some structural integrity in the lug, because otherwise you would essentially just be using the lug as a mold. So you might as well use something that you can then take out afterwards. Otherwise it will just add weight. But there is this balance where you can have some structural integrity in a 3D printed lug and then wrap it in carbon. But the ultimate end game, obviously the thing that's really exciting, is if you can print a lug and it just has all the structural integrity on its own. And at the moment,
how far away from that do you think we are? $1 million question.
The $1 million question. I think still 5 to 10 years.
So what material are you printing your lugs in at the moment?
So we've been experimenting with that sort of hybrid idea of a lug and wrapping, but for me, part of the versatility and the beauty of using lugs is that you can fabricate anywhere. You can do small batch fabrication anywhere. So let's say you were lucky enough and your frame started doing well in the USA, rather than sending whole frames over there, you can very easily set up a small studio for fabrication in the USA, so you can have them made over there. It's still artisan, but it's not as artisan as frame mitering, for example, where you're cutting each tube really intricately. That's a trade that takes years to learn. And any company that does make frames in that way, you are so beholden to your frame miterer, because if they get hit by a meteorite, or their hand gets run over, or you're completely screwed basically until you replace them. And you can't just go on Bike Biz and say frame mitre are wanted. They don't exist. You can only train them up. So yeah, lugs are a way better from that perspective, because you can essentially send a really good mechanic on an apprenticeship for, we don't yet know, this is another thing that we're experimenting with, but for 12 weeks, say, who could then learn to fabricate these frames. And it's just slightly less involved, but you have a lot more design control and a lot more kind of artistic license or freedom when you're using 3D printing for lugs than you do when you're mitering. But to answer your question about material, so I'm going off on a tangent, there's lots of metals that you can print in as well, which work perfectly. And there's new ones as well. So
can you tell me, in your little R&D think tank, what are some of the really cool ideas that you've come up with that maybe aren't able to kind of actually come to fruition yet, but what are some of the really wacky things that you've been thinking about or working on, if you're able to tell us without telling us?
So obviously the thing with 3D printing is it is moving really fast, and no one really knows how fast it will move. And I think a lot of the best ideas sometimes come out of the smaller workshops where perhaps you've got the more kind of creative engineers working. So we've started down the route of experimenting with continuous fiber, and we won't stop. Because it is going to become a thing at some point. We can make it a thing now, but not quite in the way that we'd like to, because you're not really revolutionizing the way that you make a handmade bike if you're still having to wrap it in carbon. And at the same time, because we've sort of the honest truth is we started talking about this process outwardly because people started getting in touch with us asking about it before we'd put it out there. And I freaked out thinking, oh my God, how do people know about this? We better start talking about it. So we sort of, at least in terms of getting it out there first, own the technology on a level. And there's various patents that are possible, more process patents than anything that can be defined by reinventing the bike necessarily. But most, I suppose, the journeys, you never know where your journey's going to go with R&D. That's the nature of the beast. And what we've realized, the further we've got into this and the more people that have got in touch, is that we've got the opportunity to do some really cool stuff with lots of different groups of people who are leading the charge in their field in this country. And what's nice about the fact that it's in this country is that it's just so accessible. And during lockdown, we can still have meetings, we can still have Zoom calls, and there's just a little bit less noise everywhere generally in life. So I would never have had the time to do this when I was still at WyndyMilla. My engineering friends that have kicked off the process wouldn't have had time. It's the kind of thing we talked about in the pub for years and got really excited about, but never actually actioned.
But you still can't quite tell us what you're doing because it's too secretive. But hopefully we can get you back on the podcast when some of these things.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we're working on second and third prototypes at the moment, and we've just there's more people involved. I mean, what I would say is that because this is just a thing and it's not that secretive, but in my last life at WyndyMilla, we did quite a lot in Formula One, which was completely by chance, given that I'm by no way, shape or form a petrol head. But first of all, we did the bikes in 2012 for the UK Youth UCI team, which was sponsored by Nigel Mansell. And then through a shareholder, we stumbled into making the bikes for the Manor Racing Formula One team in 2016. And then we did the same for Sahara Force India through 2017, 18, 19. And in 2019, I made a real push to try and do a technical collaboration, because I was really mindful of the fact that we were doing stuff in F1, but there was actually no real substance beyond the fact that we were making really cool bikes that matched the cars, and we actually used the same paint that was used to paint the cars, and it created a bit of a buzz, and it was good for networking. And I made it my business to, make friends with the MD of Force India, because I really wanted to make this happen. And actually, he really wanted to make it happen. But the problem with Formula One, when you really get down to the nitty gritty of using any of their production, is that in the end, their operations staff and managers will say, if you spend 1 minute working on that bike, it's 1 minute that you're not working on the car. So it's just never going to happen. And then there was this sort of fairly obvious revelation when I realized, or we realized, that actually these guys in F1 are really good at making F1 cars go fast, but we're really good at making bikes go fast. They don't really know about that. So what has happened with this project is that people I met through F1, not the F1 teams themselves, but people that make composites for F1 teams, we're lucky enough that one of them got in touch off the back of out on social media and said, hey, this sounds really exciting. Where are you going to get your carbon fiber made? Because we have been wanting to do something in cycling for a while. And these are people that have a bit more versatility than the F1 teams, because obviously they make parts for F1, they make chassis, they make rear wings or whatever else it is, but they also do a lot in aerospace, defense, and cycling is an area that they've really wanted to get into for a while. And then at the same time, as soon as we started talking about lugs, we had a few conversations with people you've had on your podcasts already regards 3D printing, and it's all suddenly taken quite a step up, and we're really excited about what we can put together using 3D printing, not necessarily continuous fiber at this stage. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport. Fueled by science.
Thanks as ever to Science in Sport for sponsoring the Cycling Podcast and service course and a lot of the other things that we do here. If you want to get 25% off your next order with Science in Sport, which of course you do, especially seeing as they have that range just dedicated to indoor training, which we're all going to be doing a lot of as it gets towards winter in the Northern Hemisphere, just enter the offer code SISCP25. Go to scienceinsport.com and enter the offer code SISCP25. Well, we'll hear a bit more from Henry later on. He's got, I mean, we could talk to Henry about anything, to be honest. He's got a lot of interesting things to say on a range of subjects. We're going to go now, though, to look at, when you look at a bike, over the years, a lot has changed. You look back over 5-10 years, you can see massive changes on the bike. One of the things that doesn't seem to have changed in 100 odd years is the humble chain. Yeah, I know they've got thinner. I know we're putting different types of lubes on them and stuff like that. Maybe materials have changed, but actually the kind of tech behind a chain hasn't really changed until possibly now. Lizzy, you've listened to this interview with Marcel Fowler from New Motion Labs, which I'm going to play in a second. It's fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, I have. And this interview was full of fascinating stuff. And it is a little bit complicated. Thankfully, I live with an engineer, and he explained to me in layman's terms why this really is so groundbreaking. But let's listen to him first, and then afterwards, let's break it down and see if we can actually understand what's going on.
So, reinventing the chain. That's a A pretty bold move.
Yeah, I also think it's something that people haven't done before. The roller chain was invented over 100 years ago. We haven't really seen much innovation in regards to chain technology since then, apart from obviously the derailleur shifting. And yeah, I mean, what you get is with the current technology is a metal kind of chain ring, a metal chain, and you see all of the advancements in everything else. You know, you've got your carbon fiber frames, you've got your pedals, cranks, even 3D printed now. But when it comes to like the transmission and the chain, you don't really see much. And one of the reasons why we kind of went into this is because I asked myself, you know, why does it have to be made out of metal? You know, why do we have these multiple chain rings? And that kind of got me down the look into why we have to use metal and steel and all these kind of things. And it's because of these kind of high stresses, because of all of this power that when you're pedaling on. And what that means is that you need to use particular materials.
So when you started redesigning a chain, obviously we think of a bicycle chain, but that sort of technology is in loads and loads of other things as well. Was it the bike that you were first looking at, or was it just the chain in general?
So it's the bike that I first looked at, really, because I like cycling, and I think it was first looking at a chain on a bike ride and the sprockets, and going, you know, what is the system actually doing? It's moving a chain so that it's a bigger ratio and then a smaller ratio to get a gear ratio. And then I thought, you know, are there other ways people could do this? It just seemed to me lots of questions being raised of why the materials, why is it so heavy? And that kind of started me on the journey, which got to where we are today.
Well, I'll tell you why, for one, I'm interested, obviously, because I use a chain on a daily basis. But I think it was about 2017, I'm guessing, I met Dan Bigham and his team. I think they were Team KGF at the time. And just chatting with them, they were talking about over dinner one night that Dan had apparently reinvented the chain. And so I've obviously, ever since then, I've been like, oh, where's this new chain coming from? And then you guys popped up. And I mean, it's not the same design. We don't know if it's the same design as Dan's, but you are actually working with Dan Bigham, aren't you?
Yeah, so we're working quite closely with Dan and his team at Hoop. You know, he's making great strides in improvements, and they've been really, really helpful with providing us with all of the data that we need. Like we're currently producing physical prototypes that we're going to be testing with the Dan team. So very excited.
Okay, here's the big reveal then. What can you tell us about this redesign? Can you tell us anything? I mean, I guess there's patents and things to be aware of.
Yeah, so we're quite well protected internationally on the technology. Really, the technology, what it is it's better at sharing power over more of the sprocket teeth. Conventional chains, 60% of all the power that you're putting into that pedal is just on one point on one tooth, and every tooth just waits to take all that load. What dual engagement and our technology does is it's much better at sharing that power and transferring that power with a lot less friction. So one of the trends that we see is for people to go bigger and bigger because that reduces that friction component. And that's because the roller kind of moves as it's in contact with the tooth. Because of the way we engage the chain, we don't have that aspect of movement. And if you don't have movement, you don't have the friction. So that's really what our technology does.
I mean, you've shown me a sort of a demo of this and some visuals. Effectively, what it is it hugs the teeth, right?
Yes. So instead of pushing from one side, our technology kind of hugs from both sides. So it's almost like instead of pushing a tree trunk, you're kind of hugging it and dragging it. So by doing that, you know, we can more torque in a smaller and lighter package. We can make the power transfer more efficient because we're kind of engaging and then we don't move on the sprocket. And and we can reduce the amount of peak stress there is on the sprocket because we share it more. And what that means is that you can make smaller or lighter systems, or you can use new materials. So we're looking down the realms of maybe thinner, lighter sprockets, maybe new materials like self-lubricating plastics, which could be really exciting.
But obviously, with cycling, this all boils down to how many watts can I shave off? I guess. What are your estimates for how many watts you can save with something like this?
So we're looking at probably about 25 watts, but that's at like a peak 2,500 watt sprinter. So, not everyone's going to reach 3,500 watts. So a normal one, 1,500, 1,200 max, you're talking about 12 to 15 watts. But the great thing about these kind of savings is with aero, obviously it's a squared rule. And the faster you go, the more you save. The good thing about drivetrain improvements is that it's from the very, very, very first and low speeds to high speeds.
Obviously, the chain is in contact with other parts of the bike, and we've touched on that a little bit. With your new technology, then, could there be implications for chain rings and sprockets? I'm thinking changes in number of teeth, changes in sizes, changes in materials, all that sort of stuff.
So in regards to size, because you're distributing much better on the tooth, you could perhaps maybe go down to a 1/4 inch pitch chain. We've been looking at that. You could perhaps go for thinner sprockets, or you could perhaps maybe go to a plastic sprocket because of those that it's about the stresses and the friction involved. So those are all things we're testing now. So we're working with a few kind of plastic manufacturers as well to see whether we can introduce some really exciting new self-lubricating materials into drivetrains.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but all this talk of plastic chain rings, sharing the load and reduced friction really got my head in a bit of a spin. How on earth could a plastic chain ring ever be strong enough to withstand the load of a bike rider, a track cyclist, a track sprinter? Anyway, I asked my in-house engineer to explain a little bit about, how this could work.
Okay, so I think there are two issues at play here. The first one, like you say, is the load and the strength of the components, and the other is friction. So I'll start with strength. Start by saying every component in a mechanical system is designed to withstand the maximum possible load that it can ever experience, and then plus some factor of safety that maybe it needs to be 50% even stronger than that. So in principle, the current chain and chainring system, I suppose if you designed it and manufactured it perfectly, then you could possibly get every tooth to share the load fairly evenly. So if you think the chain is in contact with, I should be able to work this out. So say half the chain ring, what's that? 16, 17 teeth in the small ring. It contacts those 17 teeth, but it will contact some more than others depending on the position of the pedals relative to the chain ring and also the manufacturing tolerances. And I think what he said there is that they worked out that one of the teeth would be taking up to 60% of the load that's going through the pedals. So one tooth takes 60%, maybe some take a few percent each, and then some of them are barely taking any load. So you've got to design each tooth to withstand 60% of the maximum force that can go through the pedals. I had to have a bit of a Google and look at the picture first to sort of work out what he was talking about. But essentially, what they mean is that the tolerances of the position of each chain link relative to the chainring tooth doesn't matter as much because it can play either way, and the way that it engages, it will still be in the same amount of contact. So instead of one tooth being 60% and the rest being a lot less, you have 17 teeth which share the load fairly evenly. So say if that was perfect, then you would have, say, like 6% of the maximum load instead of 60. potentially. I'm sure that the real numbers aren't quite the same.
Okay, so then why does this mean we can go over to plastic?
So yeah, like I say, every component you have to say how strong does this tooth need to be, and you say, well, it can take up to 60% of the load, so that's how strong it needs to be. Now we're saying the tooth only needs to take 6% of the load, so you have a few options there. You can either remove material, so you can use the same metal but make it half the thickness, or remove a bit of the base material. So that would reduce weight, obviously. But I suppose there are other reasons why you couldn't reduce the physical size of the material. Maybe you couldn't really make a chain that efficient if the teeth were less than a millimetre thick. So your other option is use a material which is much less strong, but also much lighter, so that you have the same geometry, but it might be half the weight, and it's still plenty strong enough to withstand the loads that you're predicting.
And one of the reasons I like talking to people like you is you take a kind of a fresh look at the bike, really. You know, you come at it with totally different ideas. When you take a look at the bike, obviously you've seen the chain, you thought, why are they doing it that way? Anything else that you see about the bike and you just think, what on earth, this technology is obsolete, or it's old, or it could be done better this way? Is there anything else you're looking at?
I think for us at New Motion Labs, it's all about the drivetrain. It's all about the converting of the physical power into the rear wheel. And so I personally think there's a real thing to look at replacing the derailleur, because that's an awful lot of weight on a road bike. And there's an awful lot of teeth that you don't use at any one time. So there is, I think there's a great potential in producing a drive that's lightweight, high efficiency, and perhaps is like a CVT. It's been tried before, but they've never kind of reached the kind of high efficiencies of a derailleur or the lightweightness. But I think that's a definite area that people are looking at, and we are as well.
And this is beyond cycling, but I'm thinking just of the applications for this sort of stuff as well, because, talk about chains and stuff. Chains are in all sorts of vehicles and equipment that use gearing. I guess you're not just limited to cycling, and certainly you're not just limited to road and track bikes, right?
No, and that's what's really kind of exciting with the advent of e-bikes. Everyone's racing around in those. You're getting cargo e-bikes in all the city centres, and with that come advantages, obviously, and disadvantages. So you're getting for instantaneous power. The problem comes really when you have instantaneous power and not very good sharing of the power on the sprocket. And so we're looking very much at e-bike cargo, where you've got really, really big powers. And then we're also looking at, factories, which have conveyors that need to last a long time. That in all of the Amazon warehouses that you see, you've got millions of products being shipped around, and all of them have chain drives in. So it's quite a massive area. And every combustion engine has a chain in.
Well, we will watch with interest. Hopefully in the springtime we'll get to see that new chain tested. If you do want to know more about it, just check out the New Motion Labs website. There's plenty of interesting stuff. There's some good visuals on there, actually, also to help you understand it, if Gabriel's intervention wasn't enough. Lizzie, let's get back to Henry now.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, people, but we are close to Christmas now. And with that, I thought we should give you a little hint and a help with what to buy your cycling friend for Christmas. So I asked Henry what would be on his Christmas list.
It's really difficult, actually, because despite getting excited about bike tech, I'm so flipping old school when it comes to tech. I'm like the guy that's still riding around without a computer on the bike, using church clocks to work out when to get home. Yeah, the tech nerd, I swear, this is a bit of a cop-out because it's not strictly tech, but the thing that I've thought that is most exciting that's come out recently, because I love the simplicity of it and the escapism and what it stands for, is the new 13-speed e-car group set from Campag. So, I would want that on my Christmas list. because it's just super simple, one by. And I love what gravel stands for, because it's the part of cycling for me that isn't obviously about competition in any way. It's just about
about going out there and doing it for the love of it, isn't it? And just
totally.
enjoying being out there. And it doesn't matter how slow you go, how fast you go, it doesn't matter what the watts are. You just go out and you remember why you love riding your bike. And for me as well, where I also love doing stuff like that, and I always incorporate it into my training, although it's not really training, but it's mental training, and it's about keeping everything fresh. So couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's not a competition. So anyone out there who's thinking about turning it into a competition, don't. It's the one area that's not, got cyclocross for that, if people want to turn it into a competition. But I also think for gravel, it's to go and explore the path less trodden in other countries as well. Because in the UK, the only thing for me with gravel is that, especially in the southeast corner where I am, you get shouted at by dog walkers a lot, horse riders a lot, farmers threaten to shoot you a lot, you're scrambling over gates a lot. But a lot of other countries have got lots more wide open space, or other parts of this country, and I love the escapism. So yeah, is it a cop out of an answer? That's my answer.
I don't think so. I will put a request into Santa Claus, Father Christmas, and in the meantime you can come and ride some of our, when lockdown's over, you can come and ride some of our gravel tracks up in the Peak District, because they're pretty good, and I don't think you're going to get shot up there either.
No, well that's it. You don't have to go too far to have a lot more space.
I actually bought my Christmas gift to myself earlier, Lizzie. I've that I'm doing most of my riding indoors, and I've been knocking about on a very, very, very old TAC X turbo trainer, which is definitely past its sell-by date. I've actually I've upgraded. I've gone really high tech. I've got a Wahoo kicker.
Ooh, very nice. Hey, that's a shock to me. Is it TAC X? Tax? I guess I should really know this, having been.
Do you know what? I have got this year. I've got no idea. Actually, I didn't even think about it. But yeah, so my indoor training has taken a step up. I've got to say, I turbo trainer. I haven't upgraded in about 6 or 7 years. The difference is massive. But in terms of Christmas gifts, then, Lizzie, if you were, for your cycling buddies and friends, what are you getting, or what do you want?
Well, I have to say, what I would like is same as Henry. I'd like a really nice gravel bike. So I have to get in touch with Orbea about that, I think. I'm having a bike room built at the moment, so I'm going to have space for my new gravel bike. I did say to my husband, do you think it's more likely that in my 30s, I've just turned 30 for all you listeners, do you think it's more likely that I'll have a baby or get a gravel bike? And he said, definitely get a gravel bike. So there we go.
Yeah, I would. As a father of a newborn, I'd definitely recommend the gravel bike at the moment.
So
we've had a tough
few days. That's on my Christmas list then. Gravel bike, not baby.
I just wish, you know what, all I would like for Christmas is some time to actually ride my bikes. That's all I would like. It's been such a tough year, what with, pandemics and an ever expanding family and work getting busier. I think, for me, I'm just looking ahead to next year, where I think I'm going to wait until spring and then have a total reset and sort of rediscover the joy of riding outside.
That's what it's about, isn't it? And that's what I was talking about with Henry. Gravel riding is really just about the joy of it, and all cycling is about the joy of it, and exploring and all of that helps. It's just a release. It's just a way to kind of release yourself from the outdoors, and I think that's what we all love about cycling. So go and get yourself a bike for Christmas, go out and ride it somewhere new, and just enjoy it. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Ho, ho, ho. So, it does sound a little bit premature for that, but actually with one thing and another, we've put our Christmas tree up just because, it was something to do and the kids love it. So, yeah, I don't mind talking about Christmas this early, even though it is still November when we're recording. Lizzie, I'm going to let you go. We will speak again next month when you will have been on a training camp. You'll be absolutely flying, I guess, by then.
Hope I won't be too fit, but no, I'll have been on my training camp. I'll have all my new kit, so it'll be really exciting, and I can tell you all about it in the next episode.
And do you know what, Lizzie, I look forward to the new year, hopefully us actually being able to meet up and ride bikes. What a thrill that would be. I mean, since you'll be astounded.
It might not be that fun for you, Tom.
Honestly, I think our fitness levels since we last rode together have diverged somewhat. Yeah, a lot, I would say.
I can cycle to Glossop, and you can cycle from your house to the cafe.
I'll come down on my fixie. It'll be great. That is my style these days. in my jeans, it'd be ace. All right, Lizzie. Listen, I'll let you go, and I'll speak to you next month.
Thanks, Tom, and Merry Christmas, everybody.